What happened when a simple social interaction turns into something you cannot fully control anymore? Not a conflict, not an argument, just a moment where perception shifts, and suddenly you are no longer seen exactly the way you see yourself. A casual bakery interaction, a small joke from the past, a simple conversation between former coworkers, and yet, one comment later, everything feels different because sometimes the most powerful changes in social situations don't come from what is said. They come from how it is interpreted. Set up. A subscriber shared a situation involving a bakery where he occasionally interacted with former co-workers. At one point in the past, he had done something he considered light-hearted. He dressed as Santa Claus during the holiday season and brought treats to the workplace. From his perspective, it was a general, friendly gesture, not directed at anyone in particular, not meant to highlight or isolate anyone, just a casual moment of festive interaction. However, later, during a conversation with former co-worker, let's call her Jessica, something changed in how that past action was interpreted. She suggested that his behavior might have been inconsistent with something he later expressed, specifically discomfort with being publicly singled out or emotionally spotlighted. Another co-worker joined in, agreeing with her interpretation, and in that moment, the tone of the conversation shifted. What was once casual became invaluative. First shift. This is where most people misunderstand social dynamics. It was not the content of the accusation that mattered. It was the structure of the moment. One person expresses a judgment, a second person agrees, and suddenly, the social weight of that interpretation increases. This is called group reinforcement. When one person questions your consistency or behavior, it is a perspective. When two people align on it, it becomes a shared narrative, at least temporary. And in that moment, the subscriber experienced something subtle but important. He was no longer just participating in a conversation. He was being interpreted inside it. And that creates a very specific feeling. Not anger, not conflict, but exposure. Emotional response. He described feeling cornered, and this is important to understand correctly. Being cornered socially does not always mean hostility. Sometimes it simply means your internal intention is not being fully represented. Your explanation is not landing the way you want, and the social group is temporarily aligned in a different interpretation. Even if the situation is playful, the emotional system does not always interpret it that way, because humans are extremely sensitive to group alignment, perception shifts, and public framing. So even a light disagreement can feel heavier than it actually is. Aftermath. After the interaction, the subscriber did something very common. He began to mentally replay the situation, not because it was severe, but because it felt unsolved internally. And from that reflection, he started forming a broader conclusion. He noticed a pattern in his past experiences, that speaking openly sometimes led to misunderstanding or discomfort, and from that a belief started forming that silence might be safer than expression. This is where many people slowly shift their social behavior, not because they are told to, but because experience teach them to reduce risk. Psychological layer. Here is where the deeper interpretation becomes important. The mind often tries to simplify emotional discomfort into rules. For example, if I spoke and it was misunderstood, I should speak less. If humor caused tension, I should be more reserved. If attention feels uncomfortable, I should avoid it. This is the brain trying to restore control, and in many cases, this leads to more caution, more restraint, more observation, less emotional exposure. There is nothing inherently wrong with this. In fact, restraint can be powerful, but there is a dysfunction that matters. There is a difference between composed silence and defensive silence. Composed silence is control. Defensive silence is fear of repetition of past discomfort. One strengthens social presence, the other reduces it. Final insight. The bakery incident was not really about hypocrisy. It was about perception, interpretation, and how quickly social meaning can shift in group settings. Most people think social tension comes from conflict, but often it comes from something more subtle. The moment your intention stops being the only version of reality in the room, and once that happens, the real challenge is not controlling how others interpret you. It is learning how to stay grounded in your own understanding without letting Temporary interpretations reshape your identity because, in the end, not every misunderstanding is a conflict, and not every disagreement is a judgment. Sometimes it is just a moment where perspectives briefly misalign and then pass. Follow for more.